create a condition they called absintheism, which was some kind of degraded physical state that is much, much worse than alcoholism. And if you look at the slides and pictures, you will actually see some beautiful art from that era where you see this green goddess or green fairy actually seducing men and just driving them to ruin, basically. As a result, in the widespread abuse of this chemical, it was banned in most of Europe, almost all of Europe and the United States, ironically, until just recently. Just recently it's come back. And in my presentation, I actually have pictures of the of this green fairy and the effects it has on men. Ironically, some of the art from that period of time actually shows them attempting to burn this green goddess at the stake, but they see her rescued from a version of her in the skies. In the clouds in the sky, she's coming to the rescue. Now, this connection to Absinth and Artemis. Artemis, whose name, and it's acknowledged in the literature, in the naming of the wormwood plant, that it's referring to Artemis, the goddess. Okay, Artemis is also known in mythology as Diana or Hecate, and Artemis was the brother of Apollo. In fact, there's all sorts of art that's available that shows her with her brother Apollo as well. Hecate is another one who was associated with Artemis, or also Isis. And she's known as the goddess of witchcraft, and she is a liminal god, which means she controls the portals to the gods themselves. She's the doorkeeper to make it available. And in fact, she is associated, this manifestation of this goddess known as Hecate, this version is known to be associated with fire, with keys, and with sorcery, are some of the key things associated with her. Now, it turns out in their history, this myth and legacy that they've retained, she was the only Titan, or near godlike type figure, which some people associate the Titans even with the fallen angels. That again I mentioned earlier for Revelation chapter 6. Many believe that the Titans are a legacy of these creatures in literature. She was the only Titan that was not banished to the abyss by Zeus, and so just like these fallen sons of God, Benai Elohim, they were banished to Tartarus, and it ties to the legends of the Titans as well. But she was spared, and what she was known for is she taught the use of plants and the use of drugs to help in witchcraft and in the sorcery activity. And in legendary writings, famous literature like the Golden Ass, she is clearly stated to be the same one as Isis. Now, to proceed further with this line of thought, let's go forward to Revelation chapter 8 and just take all we've learned here so far and look at what I'm saying is a hypothesis, a possible scenario. It's very different than what I've heard other people talk about, and I extend it only as a hypothesis to consider. It's not something I'm certain has connection, but it's worthy pondering. Revelation chapter 8 talks about the trumpet judgments. Okay, so these trumpets are blown. Every one of these trumpets has some association with 1/3, or a 1/3 destruction as a result. And I'm under the presumption this 1/3 was intentional to relate that these judgments are pertaining to Satan's rebels, the original 1/3 that rebelled along with him away from God, and that they're symbolic that all of their workings and their ends on earth are being judged. We see the second trump occur in that passage, and the seas and the ships themselves are impacted. In fact, it's clear that they're talking about real oceans here. There's a big stone that goes down and hits the water like a meteor. It capsizes ships and destroys them. So it's a clear relationship. But there's a third trump that happens, and sometimes people confuse these two in what's happening. But I don't believe it's a redundant punishment of the water. I think there's something else going on here. In verses 10 and 11, the third trump is blown, and it says a great star. The Greek word is aster, and it's described elsewhere in Revelation as being an angel. The word star is used for an angel that falls down. Okay. And this angel falls, and its name is described as wormwood. Now, the word, if you look up the Greek word, it's G894 in Strong's. It's Absinthion is the name of this particular, what I believe is an angel, wormwood. And in fact, it is a proper name. It says it's a proper name in the Greek, and that it uses a feminine form. Now, I recognize gender can be very tricky in languages, and I'm not a linguist. So I know gender could not necessarily mean men or women, but it has language uses. But ironically, it mentions this feminine form, and it says it is burning like a lamp or a torch. Now, remember these features of these mythological goddesses we've been talking about. They have an association with that. And it says they fall, just like Diana fell to Ephesus. They fall on a third of the rivers and the fountains of waters. Now, these waters, the Greek word there used is hydror. And the word hydror, one of the uses of it is many peoples. And in fact, it's described more specifically in Revelation 17, where the same waters are used, and the angel explicitly explains to John that these waters represent peoples, multitudes, and nations and tongues. So I think it's altogether possible that this same word in the same book is meaning the same thing. It actually refers not to liquid water, which was referred to in the second trump, but a representation of these peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. As a result of that, in verse 11, it says a third of these waters, or possibly peoples, become wormwood, absinthion. Okay, so they take on, or they invoke this deity, absinthion, or wormwood. And it says as a result, many men died of the waters because they were made bitter. Now again, if we're now looking at physical water here, and this word bitter is actually the Greek word pekano. And pekano means to render angry or indignant. So I see a possibility that you have these followers that have actually taken on the spirit and become bitter or angry, indignant. And as a result of this effect, many people die because of what happens to those who this wormwood falls on. Also interesting to point out in this passage, in the first trumpet you see trees are burned up. The second trumpet you have seas attacked. The fourth trumpet you have 1/3 of the sun, moon, and stars, where there's no shining day or night for 1/3. And as it turns out, Diana, Artemis, Hecate, Isis are all goddesses of the forest, seas, sun, and moon. So these are the very elements that are described in these particular set of judgments that refer to the attributes of this goddess itself. And in fact, I'll just mention further